Thursday morning arrived like every other morning. Marcus Donovan's alarm sounded at 5:45, and he was already awake. 6 years of corporate discipline had trained his body to anticipate the summons. He showered in the dark to avoid waking Zara, dressed in the same rotation of pressed shirts and conservative ties that marked him as professional, but never flashy, never threatening. Breakfast was coffee and toast eaten, standing at the kitchen counter while reviewing his calendar on his phone. The email notification appeared at 6:47. From Victoria Ashford, CEO. Subject: Urgent. Chicago Opportunity. Marcus's thumb hovered over the screen for 3 seconds before opening it. Executive Summary. Henderson Hotels required pitch presentation by week's end. Chicago. High stakes. Victoria needed an analyst who understood luxury hospitality marketing from the ground up. She wanted Marcus. Flight departed 4 p.m. today, October 12th. Return Saturday evening. His heart kicked against his ribs. For a black man in corporate America, opportunities like this arrived once in a career, if they arrived at all. More often they went to people whose faces fit the expected mold, whose networks extended into country clubs and golf courses Marcus would never be invited to join. He'd worked at Ashford & Partners for 6 years, producing analyses that saved clients millions, optimizing campaigns that exceeded every projection. His reward had been steady employment and cost of living raises that never quite matched inflation. Now Victoria Ashford, the woman who'd become CEO at 38 through a combination of brilliance and ruthlessness, wanted him specifically. The email didn't say why. It simply said, "Your work speaks for itself. I need that voice in Chicago." Marcus set down his phone and pressed his palms flat against the counter, breathing deliberately. This could change everything. Or it could be exactly what Richard Kendrick had been waiting for. An opportunity to watch Marcus fail publicly, to prove that merit only went so far when you didn't look like everyone else in the boardroom. A small sound from the hallway pulled him from his thoughts. Zara stood in her pajamas, her face flushed, her dark curls matted against her forehead. Even from across the room, Marcus could see she was radiating heat. "Baby, what are you doing up? Don't feel good, Daddy." Her voice was small, uncertain. He crossed to her in 3 strides and pressed his hand to her forehead. The fever was immediate and unmistakable. He carried her to the couch, grabbed the thermometer from the bathroom cabinet, and waited while it beeped. 38.9 degrees Celsius. High enough to require attention, not high enough for the emergency room. The calculation was automatic after 6 years of single parenthood. Zara needed rest fluids, fever reducer, and she needed her father home, not on a plane to Chicago. Marcus looked at his daughter curled on the couch, her small body fighting whatever virus had found her, and felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling onto his shoulders. Call in sick, stay home, and watch this opportunity vanish. Or find a solution that let him be both the father Zara deserved and the professional who could finally prove his worth. He called his sister. Sienna lived in Sacramento, 90 miles away, but she'd always been Marcus's backup plan. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Marcus, it's not even 7. What's wrong?" "Zara's sick. Fever. I have a work emergency. Chicago today. Can you come?" Sienna was silent for a beat, and Marcus could hear her mental calculations. "Today's Thursday. I'm covering Mom's doctor appointment in Fairfield at 2. I could be there by 6 tonight. Will that work? Flight's at 4. Can anyone else watch her?" Marcus ran through his limited options. Grace Holloway. Their neighbor sometimes helped in emergencies. She was kind, reliable, good with children. But asking her to take a sick 6-year-old for 10 hours felt like an imposition that bordered on exploitation. "I'll figure something out. Just get here when you can." By 8:15, Grace had agreed to keep Zara until Sienna arrived. By 8:30, Marcus had administered children's acetaminophen and left detailed instructions on a notepad. By 8:45, he was in his car, heading toward the San Francisco office, his mind churning through everything that could go wrong. The Ashford & Partners building rose 20 stories above the financial district, all glass and steel, and barely contained ambition. Marcus had spent 6 years in this space, 6 years of arriving early and leaving late, of producing work that was consistently excellent and consistently overlooked. He'd learned to make himself small to avoid drawing attention, to let his analyses speak for themselves while other people claimed credit. Survival strategies for navigating corporate America when your skin color made you automatically suspect in ways no one would ever acknowledge aloud. The conference room on the 9th floor held 12 people when Marcus entered at 9:03. Victoria Ashford stood at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her expression revealing nothing. She was shorter than Marcus had expected when he'd first started at the firm. 5'6" in heels, slender with blonde hair, she wore in a style that was professional without being severe. But what she lacked in physical presence she made up for in sheer force of will. When Victoria spoke, rooms went quiet. Richard Kendrick sat 3 seats to her right. The CFO was 48, silver-haired, with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to prove anything to anyone. His family had money. His networks extended into boardrooms across the city. He'd been passed over for CEO when Victoria was promoted, and the slight had calcified into resentment that poisoned every interaction. Victoria began without preamble. Henderson Hotels. 47 properties luxury market expansion plans require comprehensive marketing overhaul. They're considering 3 firms. We need to be the firm they choose. The pitch is tomorrow at 9 a.m. in Chicago. I need someone who understands data-driven luxury positioning, someone who can speak to both creative vision and ROI optimization. She let the silence stretch for 3 seconds. Then her gaze found Marcus. Mr. Donovan, your analysis of the Meridian Resort campaign last quarter demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking Henderson requires. I want you in Chicago. The room shifted. 12 people suddenly hyper-aware of the black analyst who'd just been elevated above senior staff. Marcus felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. Richard's voice was smooth, reasonable, deadly. With respect, Ms. Ashford, this is an $8.5 million account. Perhaps someone with more client-facing experience would be appropriate. David Rothstein has handled presentations at this level before. I'm not interested in what's been done before. Victoria's tone could have cut glass. I'm interested in what will win this account. Marcus saved the Garrison campaign $3.2 million through predictive analytics that no one else in this firm saw coming. That's the thinking I need. The account requires nuanced relationship management. Richard wasn't backing down. High-touch client interaction. Cultural sensitivity to cultural sensitivity. Victoria's interruption was surgical. Are you suggesting Mr. Donovan lacks that qualification? The question hung in the air like a dare. Richard's face remained neutral, but Marcus saw the calculation behind his eyes. Any answer would be a minefield. I'm suggesting the stakes are high enough to warrant experience. Experience is what got us a 14% win rate last year. Victoria closed her laptop with definitive finality. I choose based on results, Mr. Kendrick. Not tenure, not familiarity. Results. The flight leaves at 4 p.m. Marcus, you're on it. Conference adjourned. People filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact with Marcus as they passed. He remained seated, trying to process what had just happened. Victoria had publicly backed him against the CFO, had staked her credibility on his ability to deliver. The opportunity was real. So was the target now painted on his back. Richard paused at the door, his expression pleasant, his voice pitched low enough that only Marcus could hear. Don't make her regret this. The hours until departure became a blur of preparation. Marcus assembled presentation materials, reviewed Henderson's market position, analyzed their competitor strategies, built contingency arguments for every possible objection. He worked through lunch, his phone propped beside his computer, showing continuous updates from Grace about Zara's condition. Fever holding steady, eating popsicles, watching cartoons, asking for daddy. At 2:47, Marcus stepped into the men's room and allowed himself 60 seconds of panic. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the sink. This was too big, too visible. If he succeeded, it proved nothing except that he could do the job he'd been hired to do 6 years ago. If he failed, it confirmed every prejudice Richard had carefully avoided stating aloud. His reflection stared back at him. 35 years old, tired eyes, stubble he'd shaved that morning already darkening his jaw. Behind him in the mirror, the ghost of the man he'd been before Sarah died. Before single fatherhood had ground down every sharp edge, leaving only the determination to provide for his daughter and get through one day at a time. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory from their last real conversation before the accident. You're so busy being safe, Marcus. When are you going to be great? He'd promised himself he'd be great for Zara, that he'd build a life she could be proud of where she never had to apologize for her father or make excuses for their circumstances. Maybe this was how that promise got kept, by taking risks that terrified him, by being visible when every instinct screamed to hide. Marcus dried his hands, straightened his tie, and walked back to his desk. At 3:22, he locked his computer and headed for the airport. San Francisco International was crowded for a Thursday afternoon. Marcus checked in at the Alaska Airlines counter, watching the departure board with growing unease. Weather warnings scrolled across the bottom. Severe thunderstorms approaching the Midwest. Delays possible. He told himself it would be fine. Flights got delayed all the time. They'd work around it. Victoria appeared at the gate at 4:18, 20 minutes before scheduled boarding. She wore a black suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, carried a leather briefcase that looked both expensive and practical. She acknowledged him with a brief nod and took a seat 4 rows away, opening her laptop immediately. The message was clear. Professional distance, CEO and analyst, nothing more. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Grace. The conversation was quick, reassuring. Zara's fever had broken. She was playing with dolls, asking when Daddy would be home. Sienna was running late, but would arrive by 7. "I'll call again before bed." Marcus kept his voice low, aware of other passengers nearby. "Tell her I love her to the moon. And back, Daddy." Zara's voice was distant but clear. Grace must have put him on speaker. "Always and back." The first delay announcement came at 4:53. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to weather conditions in Chicago, Flight 847 has been delayed approximately 45 minutes. We'll provide updates as we receive them." By 5:30, the delay had extended to 2 hours. By 6:15, storms had grounded everything east of Denver. The terminal filled with stranded passengers, their frustration mounting with each new announcement. Marcus watched Victoria make phone calls, her expression never changing, her voice remaining level, even when she was clearly getting nowhere. Around 7, she returned to the gate area and sat down 3 seats away from him. "Every hotel within 50 miles of O'Hare is booked." Her voice was flat, addressing him directly for the first time since the office. "Corporate rates, personal contacts, everything. The storm has half the Midwest trapped. What about the presentation, 9 a.m. tomorrow?" "Non-negotiable. Henderson's CEO flies out at noon. If we're not there, we lose the account." Marcus pulled out his phone and started searching. Oakland hotels near the airport. Budget chains, extended stays, anything with availability. The search results came back bleak. No vacancy, no vacancy. Booked solid. At 8:17 p.m., the final announcement came. "Flight 847 to Chicago is cancelled. All passengers should proceed to the customer service desk for rebooking options. We apologize for the inconvenience." The stampede toward customer service was immediate. 200 people converging on 4 agents' voices, rising tempers fraying. Marcus stayed in his seat doing the math. Even if they got rebooked on the first morning flight, it wouldn't land until 8:30 Chicago time. 30 minutes to get downtown in morning traffic was impossible. They'd missed the presentation. Unless they found a room tonight, slept a few hours, and caught the earliest possible departure. Victoria was already on her phone working through some list of contacts Marcus couldn't see. He watched her make call after call, her professional composure starting to crack around the edges. Frustration bled through in the tightness of her jaw, the way her free hand gripped her briefcase strap. At 9:43, she ended a call and looked at Marcus directly. "I found something. Bayview Suites near the airport. It's not one of the chains. The manager says they have availability." Marcus felt something cold slide down his spine. How many rooms? Victoria's hesitation lasted less than a second, but it was enough. 1. The words dropped between them like stones. Marcus's mind immediately calculated the implications. CEO and employee, white woman and black man, 1 hotel room, 1 night. In the morning, assuming they made the flight, they'd walk into the Henderson presentation. But the real question was what walked out of that hotel room. What assumptions people would make. What Richard Kendrick would do with the information once he found out. Because he would find out. Corporate expense reports weren't secret. Someone would notice. Someone would talk. "I'll take the floor," Marcus heard himself say it, his voice steady despite everything churning beneath. "You take the bed. We get a few hours sleep, catch the 6 a.m. flight, make the meeting. Professional. Practical." Victoria studied him for a long moment. "Are you sure the alternative is sleeping on an airport bench and showing up to the biggest presentation of my career looking like I spent the night in a homeless shelter?" Marcus managed something close to a smile. "I've slept on worse floors." The Bayview Suites was exactly the kind of place that didn't show up on booking apps. Small, slightly worn, clinging to respectability through sheer determination. The lobby smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and desperation. The young woman behind the desk looked exhausted, her name tag reading Jennifer in faded letters. 1 room available. Queen bed. She glanced between them, her expression carefully neutral. "That's all we have left. Everyone's stranded from the storm. We'll take it." Victoria's tone left no room for discussion. The keycard felt heavier than it should as Marcus followed Victoria to the elevator. Room 304, 3rd floor. The hallway was dim, the carpet showing its age, the walls needing fresh paint. Marcus wondered how many other people had made similar choices in this building. How many had walked into rooms they couldn't afford to be seen entering. The room itself was compact. One queen bed dominated the space, flanked by a nightstand that had seen better decades. A small desk sat beneath the window, a lamp that flickered when Victoria turned it on, a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. The whole space couldn't have been more than 200 square feet. Marcus immediately assessed the sofa in the corner, worn but functional. He'd slept on worse during his college years when money had been tighter than it was now. The important thing was keeping distance, maintaining boundaries, making sure that when the inevitable questions came, he could look people in the eye and tell the truth. Nothing happened. Just two professionals doing whatever was necessary to serve their client. You can use the bathroom first. Victoria was already pulling out her laptop, creating her own space at the desk. I need to review the presentation one more time. Marcus grabbed his overnight bag and retreated to the bathroom. The fluorescent lighting was harsh, unflattering, showing every line of exhaustion on his face. He brushed his teeth, changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, and gave himself a final look in the mirror. Tomorrow would determine whether Victoria's faith in him was justified or catastrophically misplaced. When he emerged, Victoria had changed into yoga pants and a Stanford sweatshirt. The CEO facade had softened, replaced by something that looked almost human. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her laptop open, but her hands were still. Not typing, not reading, just staring at the screen. Can't sleep. Marcus moved toward the sofa, keeping maximum distance. Can't remember the last time I slept well. She closed the laptop. Too many variables I can't control. The Henderson presentation. Everything. She looked at him directly, and for the first time, Marcus saw past the professional facade to the exhaustion underneath. Running a company, managing egos, justifying every decision to people who think I'm too young, too aggressive, too female, being questioned on choices I know are right but can't prove until after they pay off. You chose me today. That took courage. Or stupidity. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Richard will use this. The moment we walk into that conference room tomorrow, he'll start building his case for why it was a mistake. Then we make sure it isn't a mistake. And if we don't, if Henderson chooses another firm despite everything, then at least you tried something different. Marcus settled onto the sofa, feeling the springs dig into his back. You said you choose based on results. Well, I'll give you results. Whether that's enough is up to them. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the storm that had grounded their flight continued its assault on the Bay Area. Rain hammered the windows. Wind rattled the glass. Inside room 304, two people who barely knew each other tried to find comfortable positions in uncomfortable furniture. At 10:34, Marcus's phone vibrated. Video call from Grace's number. He stepped onto the small balcony, sliding the glass door closed behind him to give Victoria privacy. The outside air was cold and wet, but at least it was real. Zara's face appeared on the screen, her eyes bright despite the late hour. Daddy, you're not in Chicago yet. Flight got cancelled, baby. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. I'll go tomorrow. Is it a nice hotel? Marcus glanced back through the glass at the worn room, at Victoria sitting rigidly on the edge of the bed, at the life he'd built through careful choices and constant vigilance. It's fine, sweetie. Just a place to sleep. Aunt Sienna says my fever's all gone. I had chicken nuggets for dinner. That's great, baby. You feeling better? Mostly. Zara's expression turned serious in that way children had of cutting through everything superficial. Daddy, I drew a picture today. At school. Before I got sick. Yeah. What did you draw, you and me at the park? But I couldn't draw your smile right. She tilted her head, studying him through the screen. What do you mean I don't know what your real smile looks like anymore? Not the one you do for pictures. The real one, like in the photos with Mummy. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His 6-year-old daughter had been studying his face, cataloguing the difference between genuine happiness and the performance he put on to convince her everything was fine. When had she gotten old enough to see through him? When had he started failing her so completely that even his smiles were hollow? Can you smile? So I can see Zara's request was innocent, curious. Marcus forced his lips upward, feeling the muscles strain with the effort. How's this? That's the tired smile. Zara shook her head. I want the one from the pictures. Through the glass door, Marcus saw Victoria looking toward the balcony. Their eyes met for a moment, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Two people performing happiness for audiences who deserved better. Tell you what, baby, when I get home, we'll work on smiling together. Real ones. Deal. Okay. But you have to tell me a story first. I can't sleep without a story. Marcus leaned against the balcony railing, letting rain mist across his face, and began the tale he'd been telling Zara in variations for months. Once upon a time, there was a knight named Marcus. He was very brave and very strong, but he was also very tired. He'd been fighting dragons for so long that he'd forgotten what peace felt like. Every day he put on his armor and went to battle, and every night he came home to his princess daughter and pretended he wasn't wounded. The princess was smart, though. She could see through the armor to the hurt underneath, and she asked her father a question that changed everything. "Why do you fight alone?" "Because knights are supposed to be strong," he told her. "Because showing weakness means failing the people who depend on you." "But you're not failing me," the princess said. "You're teaching me that it's okay to be alone, that needing help makes you weak."
"Is that really what you want me to learn?"
Marcus's voice caught. He cleared his throat and continued. The knight didn't have an answer for that, so he promised his daughter he'd think about it, that he'd try to remember that asking for help wasn't the same as giving up. When the story ended, Zara was nearly asleep. "I love you, Daddy. To the moon. And back, baby. Always and back." He ended the call and stood in the rain for another minute, gathering himself. When he finally slid the glass door open and stepped back inside, Victoria was no longer at the desk. She'd moved to the bed, sitting with her back against the headboard, her knees drawn up, her expression distant. "Your daughter sounds wonderful." Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "She's everything good I've ever done." Marcus moved toward the sofa, suddenly aware of how small the room was, how intimate this situation could become if either of them let it. What happened to her mother? The question should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like an invitation. Marcus sank onto the sofa, exhaustion finally overwhelming caution. Car accident. 4 years ago. Zara was 2. She doesn't really remember Sarah except through photos and stories I tell her. I'm sorry. It was instant. That's what they told me. Sarah didn't suffer. She just stopped existing. 1 minute she was dropping Zara at daycare, planning dinner, living her life. The next minute, a state trooper was at my door explaining that a drunk driver had crossed the median on I-580. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, that must be terrifying. Raising a child alone. Being responsible for another person's entire world, every single day. Marcus rubbed his face, feeling the stubble scratch against his palms. Every decision I make, I think about what Sarah would want for Zara. Whether I'm doing enough. Whether I'm teaching her the right lessons. Whether she'll grow up knowing she was loved, even when I was too tired to show it properly.
"You're showing it!"
Victoria's certainty was unexpected. The way she talks about you, the way you dropped everything to tell her a story, even though you're exhausted and stressed about tomorrow. That's love. I don't know if it's enough. It never feels like enough. But that doesn't mean it isn't. The vulnerability in Victoria's voice made Marcus look at her more carefully. She was staring at her hands, looking younger than 38, looking like someone who'd spent a long time convincing herself that being alone was the same as being strong. "What about you?" The question slipped out before Marcus could stop it. Family people waiting for you to call Victoria's laugh was hollow. My parents divorced when I was 10. Neither of them particularly wanted custody. I was an inconvenience to their new lives, their new partners, their fresh starts. I spent most of my teenage years in boarding schools, learning that depending on people was a luxury I couldn't afford.
"That's why you work so hard."
The realization clicked into place. Why you're at the office before everyone else and leave after everyone's gone. If I show weakness, people question my judgment. If they question my judgment, I lose the authority I need to do my job. Victoria met his eyes. "You asked earlier why I chose you for Henderson. Want to know the real reason? Because I'm good at my job. Because in 6 years of working at this company, you're the only person who's ever looked at me like I'm just a person giving a presentation. Not a title, not an obstacle, not an opportunity to advance, just a person trying to do work that matters." The statement hung between them, honest and raw. Marcus felt something shift in the space between professional distance and human connection. "I see you." His voice was quiet. Not the CEO, the person underneath who's working herself to exhaustion trying to prove she deserves a position she earned 3 years ago. "No one said that to me." Victoria's voice broke.
"I can't remember the last time someone saw past what I do to who I am."
The rain continued its percussion against the windows. The cheap lamp flickered, casting unsteady shadows. Two strangers who weren't quite strangers anymore, suspended in a moment that felt both dangerous and necessary. They talked until nearly 2 a.m. About loneliness and fear, and the weight of performing strength when you felt anything but strong. About Sarah and what it meant to love someone so completely that losing them left you hollowed out. about Victoria's parents and the particular kind of abandonment that came from being unwanted by the people who were supposed to want you most. Marcus learned that Victoria cried at commercials featuring families but never at movies, that she'd taught herself to cook from YouTube videos but could never get risotto to turn out right, that she read mystery novels before bed because they had clear solutions and definitive endings, unlike real life where nothing was ever truly resolved. Victoria learned that Marcus had wanted to be an architect but couldn't afford the degree, that he still sketched building designs in margins when he thought no one was looking, that he made elaborate bedtime stories for Zara featuring characters who slowly learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. At 2:03, the conversation finally wound down into comfortable silence. Marcus was stretched out on the sofa, a thin blanket pulled over him. Victoria had slid down the headboard until she was lying flat, her eyes half closed. "Thank you," her voice was barely above a whisper, "for seeing me. It's been a long time since anyone did. Thank you for choosing me, even knowing what it might cost. What it might cost us both." The correction was subtle but significant. An acknowledgement that they were in this together now, whatever this was. Whatever came next would affect them equally. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling exhaustion finally drag him towards sleep. His last conscious thought was of Zara's question, "Why do you fight alone?" Maybe the answer was that he didn't have to anymore. Morning arrived too quickly. The alarm Marcus had set for 5:30 jolted him awake, and for a disoriented moment he couldn't remember where he was. Then reality assembled itself. Hotel room, Victoria, Chicago, Henderson. He looked toward the bed. Victoria was already up, fully dressed in her black suit makeup, perfect, every trace of last night's vulnerability erased. She stood at the window phone pressed to her ear, discussing flight options with someone on the other end. Marcus grabbed his clothes and retreated to the bathroom. When he emerged 8 minutes later, showered and dressed, Victoria had coffee waiting from the lobby's questionable machine. 6:15 flight. We need to leave in 20 minutes. Her voice was crisp, professional, as if the conversation in the darkness had never happened. I've arranged a car to O'Hare from the airport. The drive to SFO was silent. The airport was chaos, other stranded passengers scrambling for the first available flights. But Victoria's efficiency cut through the disorder. They were through security by 5:48, at the gate by 5:55, boarding at 6:07. On the plane, Victoria took the window seat and opened her laptop, immediately creating a barrier of professionalism between them. Marcus understood. Last night had been an aberration, a moment of weakness brought on by exhaustion and circumstance. This morning required different discipline. The flight landed at O'Hare at 11:43 local time. The presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m. at Henderson's downtown headquarters. They'd missed it by nearly 3 hours. Victoria made a call as soon as they hit the jetway. Her voice was steady, apologetic, but not groveling. Weather delays unavoidable, requesting the opportunity to present whenever Henderson's CEO had availability. She listened for 40 seconds, her expression revealing nothing. Then 2 p.m. works. We'll be there. Thank you for the accommodation. She ended the call and looked at Marcus. We have 2 hours. Hotel, freshen up, run through the presentation one more time. Then we save this account, or we don't. The presentation at 2 p.m. was flawless. Marcus had never been more focused, more articulate, more certain of his analysis. He walked Henderson's executive team through market positioning, competitive advantages, ROI projections, creative concepts backed by data that proved their viability. Victoria supported him perfectly, handling relationship questions and big-picture strategy, while Marcus provided the granular evidence that made it all credible. By 3:45, they had a commitment. Henderson would sign with Ashford and Partners, $8.5 million over 3 years. The contract would be finalized by end of business Monday. On the flight home, Marcus and Victoria sat across the aisle from each other, not speaking, not acknowledging the hours they'd spent in that hotel room, the vulnerabilities they'd revealed, the connection that had formed in darkness and rain. Victoria worked on her laptop. Marcus stared out the window at clouds that looked like mountains, thinking about Zara's question, about Victoria's confession, about the way loneliness could make you brave or careful, or some combination of both. The plane landed in San Francisco at 9:37 p.m. Pacific time. They disembarked without speaking, collected their bags, walked toward the exit. At the curb, Victoria finally turned to him. "Good work today, Mr. Donovan." Henderson was impressed. "Thank you for the opportunity, Ms. Ashford." The formality was deliberate, professional distance re-established. Whatever had happened in room 304 of the Bayview Suites was sealed away, filed under personal history that couldn't be acknowledged in daylight.
Marcus watched Victoria's car service pull away her silhouette, visible through the rear window for a moment, before the vehicle merged into airport traffic. Then he found his own car in long-term parking and drove home to Oakland, his mind replaying the past 36 hours on an endless loop. The apartment was quiet when he arrived at 10:43. Sienna had left a note, "Zara's asleep. Fever, completely gone. She was a dream. Text me tomorrow." Marcus checked on his daughter, watching her sleep peacefully in her too-small bed that she'd soon outgrow. Her face was peaceful, unburdened by adult complexities. He thought about the night in his story about fighting dragons alone, about Zara's wisdom that asking for help didn't equal weakness. Something had changed in Chicago. Not the successful presentation or the secured account, though those mattered. Something deeper. A recognition that the walls he'd built to protect himself from further loss were also walls that kept out connection growth, the possibility of being seen. Victoria had seen him. For a few hours in a cramped hotel room, two people had let their defenses drop and found something unexpected underneath. Not romance exactly, not even friendship yet. Just the beginning of understanding that maybe loneliness wasn't inevitable. Marcus changed into pajamas, set his alarm, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring Monday morning and office politics and Richard Kendrick's inevitable questions. Tomorrow would require rebuilding the professional distance that had collapsed in the night. Tomorrow would be complicated. But tonight, just for tonight, Marcus let himself feel something he'd almost forgotten: hope. Small and fragile and terrifying, but unmistakably real. The door was open now. Whether he walked through it or not was still uncertain. But for the first time in 4 years, walking through felt possible. Monday morning arrived with the weight of unfinished conversations. Marcus stepped into the Ashford & Partners lobby at 7:42, earlier than usual, hoping the empty corridors would give him space to breathe. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt longer than it had any right to. When the doors opened, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights greeted him like an old acquaintance who no longer knew his name. Victoria's email sat in his inbox, time-stamped 6:17 a.m. Subject line, Henderson debrief scheduled for 2 p.m. Thursday. Nothing personal. Nothing acknowledging the hours they'd spent talking in that cramped hotel room, the way her voice had cracked when she'd spoken about her parents, the way he'd finally admitted he didn't know if happiness was something he was allowed to feel anymore. Professional distance had been restored with surgical precision. He told himself this was better, safer. The alternative was a minefield he couldn't afford to navigate. By Wednesday, the whispers started. Marcus first noticed them in the 4th-floor break room during his afternoon coffee run. 3 junior analysts clustered near the water cooler, voices low but not quite low enough. The conversation died the moment he entered. Sarah from accounting offered a tight smile and hurried past with her mug eyes fixed on the carpet. Connor, a 26-year-old hotshot who'd joined the firm 8 months ago, lingered by the sink. "Hey, Marcus, any pointers on how to—"
"You know, move up around here."
The words hung in the air with deliberate weight. Connor's smirk was barely concealed behind his coffee cup. Marcus kept his voice level. "Work speaks for itself. Right, sure." Connor's laugh was sharp. "That's definitely what everyone's saying." The break room door swung shut behind Marcus before he could respond. His hands were shaking. He gripped the coffee cup tighter, feeling the heat seep through the cardboard sleeve, focusing on the physical sensation to keep the rage from spilling over. One hotel room, one night of decent conversation, and suddenly every achievement he'd earned in 6 years was suspect. The digital ROI analysis that had saved the company $3.2 million last quarter meaningless. The Henderson contract he'd helped secure, just a convenient narrative for gossip. Thursday afternoon brought the first concrete evidence. Richard Kendrick made his move with the subtlety of a man who believed himself untouchable. The expense report materialized on the communal printer at 2:34 a.m., left face up on the tray where anyone walking past could see it. Ashford V. and Donovan M. Bayview Suites, Oakland. Single room occupancy. October 12th, $1,8,900. The timestamps and room details were highlighted in yellow, as if someone wanted to make absolutely certain no one could miss them. Sarah from accounting was the first to notice. She took a photo with her phone, and within 24 hours the image had circulated through every department. Slack channels buzzed. Email chains that carefully excluded Marcus sprouted and multiplied. By Friday morning, the entire company knew. Marcus learned about it from the silence. He walked into the Monday strategy meeting 7 minutes early and found 4 colleagues already seated around the conference table. Their conversation stopped mid-sentence. Eyes flicked toward him, then away. Someone coughed. Papers were shuffled with unnecessary intensity. The air in the room felt thick enough to choke on. The whispers followed him everywhere after that. Corridors, elevators, the parking garage. Sometimes he caught fragments.
Did you hear? With the CEO? One room. How else do you think he got picked for Chicago? Other times, people simply stopped talking when he approached their sudden silence more damning than any words. Marcus had spent 6 years building a reputation based on merit on late nights and meticulous analysis on being twice as good to get half as far. All of it reduced to rubble by a piece of paper and people's willingness to believe the worst. Late October afternoon, Marcus arrived at Zara's school for pickup and found Grace Holloway, another parent from Zara's class, waiting near the entrance. Her smile was strained. "Marcus, I wanted to ask you something." She glanced around, lowering her voice. "Is it true you're dating your boss?" The question hit him like cold water. He managed to keep his expression neutral. "No.
We had a business trip, that's all." "Right, okay." Grace nodded, but her eyes said she didn't believe him. "I just thought, with the rumors. People are talking." Zara appeared in the doorway before he could respond, her backpack bouncing as she ran toward him. "Daddy." Her smile was pure sunshine, uncomplicated joy that made his chest ache. She grabbed his hand, already chattering about the art project they'd started in class, and Marcus let her pull him toward the car. They were halfway home when Zara's voice turned thoughtful. "Daddy, what does dating mean?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Where'd you hear that word, baby? Emma's mum was talking about you and a lady. She said you were dating." Zara's tone was curious, innocent. "Are you dating Miss Victoria?" "No, sweetheart. Miss Victoria is just someone Daddy works with." "Oh." Zara swung her legs, thinking. "Emma's mum said other stuff too, but I don't think she was being nice." Marcus pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine, but he couldn't bring himself to move. His 6-year-old daughter was already being exposed to adult cruelty, to the poison people could spread with careless words. She deserved better than this. She deserved a father whose reputation was spotless, whose integrity no one questioned, who could walk through the world without this shadow following him. That night, Marcus typed out his resignation letter. The words came easier than he'd expected. 3 paragraphs explaining his decision to pursue other opportunities, thanking the firm for 6 years of employment, offering 2 weeks' notice. He saved the document but didn't send it. Not yet. He needed to think, to figure out what came next, to plan how he'd explain to Zara why Daddy was changing jobs again. Late October, the email arrived at 3:47 p.m., precisely timed like everything Victoria did. "Ms. Ashford requests your presence in her office at 4:00 p.m. today. Regards, Jennifer Shaw, Executive Assistant." Marcus stared at the message for a full minute before opening a new document. His resignation letter stared back at him, cursor blinking at the signature line. He added his name, attached it to a draft email, left the recipient field blank. Better to have it ready. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt like ascending to an execution. Jennifer Shaw's desk sat outside Victoria's office, a fortress of efficiency guarding the inner sanctum. She offered Marcus a professional nod and gestured toward the closed door. "She's expecting you." Victoria stood at the window when he entered, silhouetted against the San Francisco skyline. The late afternoon sun turned her hair into a halo of light, but when she turned, her expression was all business. Sharp angles and careful control. "Close the door." He did. "Sit." He remained standing. She didn't push. Instead, she moved to her desk, opened a folder, and slid a document across the polished surface. "Team lead position, digital analytics. 98,000 annual salary. Reports directly to Margaret Hayes in the Western Division. Effective immediately." Marcus looked at the offer letter, at the numbers that represented a 40% salary increase, at the title he'd worked toward for 6 years. Everything he'd wanted, everything he'd earned, offered now in the aftermath of a scandal that had tainted every achievement. "I can't." Victoria's composure cracked just for a moment. A flash of something raw in her eyes before the facade reassembled itself. "Your performance on the Henderson account was exceptional. You saved us $3.2 million last quarter. You've earned this promotion. It doesn't matter what happened in Chicago." The words came out rougher than he'd intended. He forced himself to meet her gaze. "It matters what people believe happened. I have a 6-year-old daughter who will grow up hearing stories about her father. Those stories will not be that he slept his way to a promotion." The air between them crackled with everything they weren't saying. Victoria's fingers pressed against the desk edge, knuckles white. "I would never compromise my integrity, I know." Marcus's voice softened despite himself. "I know that. But everyone else, they've already decided. And if I accept this now, it confirms every suspicion, every rumor, every ugly thing people are whispering in break rooms and parking lots.
So my judgment means nothing because of gossip. Your judgment means everything. That's why I can't accept. Not like this." He took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision settling into his bones. "I'm sorry, Victoria, but I won't do this to Zara. I won't give people the ammunition to destroy what she thinks of her father." He turned toward the door. "Marcus." Her voice stopped him, and when he looked back, he saw pain and confusion and something that looked like grief playing across her features. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't. Some things are already broken." The door closed behind him with a sound like finality. Victoria stood alone in her office as the sun dipped below the horizon, as the city lights began their nightly dance, as the building emptied around her. She'd won the Henderson account, secured the promotion she'd planned to offer Marcus for 3 months, navigated a potential PR disaster with professional grace. By every measurable standard, she'd succeeded. So why did success taste like ash? She didn't sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. By early November, exhaustion had carved shadows under her eyes and left her thoughts tangled in knots she couldn't untie. She found herself in her car one Saturday morning, driving east across the Bay Bridge toward Oakland without consciously deciding to go there. The HR system had Marcus's home address. Accessing it was unethical, possibly illegal, definitely a violation of privacy policies. She did it anyway. Lakeside Park sat 3 blocks from his apartment. Victoria parked near the entrance and told herself she was just taking a walk, getting some air, clearing her head. The lie lasted until she saw them. Marcus pushed Zara on the swings, his hands gentle on her back as she pumped her legs toward the sky. The morning was crisp and bright leaves turning gold and red in the trees, and from a distance they looked like a picture of domestic happiness. But Victoria had learned to read the spaces between gestures, the tension in shoulders, the smile that didn't quite reach the eyes. Marcus was performing joy for his daughter, wearing happiness like a costume that no longer fit.
"That's the fake smile, Daddy." Zara's voice carried across the playground, clear and certain. "I want the real one back. I'm trying, baby. Try harder, or find someone to help you." Victoria stood behind an oak tree, hidden from view, her heart cracking open at the simple wisdom in a 6-year-old's words. This was her doing. She'd chosen Marcus for Chicago because he was brilliant, because his work spoke for itself, because she'd wanted to prove that merit mattered more than politics or tenure. She'd shared that hotel room because the alternative was sleeping on an airport bench and missing the meeting that could secure their biggest account of the year. Every decision had been logical, professional, defensible. And together, those decisions had destroyed him. Victoria returned to her car and sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes, watching Marcus and Zara play, watching him pretend, watching his daughter see through the pretense and love him anyway. When they finally left the park, hand in hand, headed toward an apartment complex she could barely see from her vantage point, Victoria made a choice. Not for romance. Not because she'd spent 2 weeks replaying their hotel conversation in quiet moments, remembering the way he'd talked about his late wife, with a grief so profound it had made her own loneliness feel small by comparison. Not because she'd found herself thinking about him during board meetings and strategy sessions and late nights in her empty penthouse. For justice. Early November. Victoria arrived at the office before dawn and went straight to Nathan Pierce's workspace. He looked up from his computer, surprised to find the CEO standing in his doorway at 6:15 a.m. "I need your help with something." She kept her voice low. "Investigating Richard Kendrick." Nathan's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "What did you find?" The expense report leak came from him. "I have security footage showing him at the printer at 2:34 a.m. making copies of confidential financial documents." She paused. "But I think that's just the surface. What are you looking for?" "Everything. Email correspondence, financial transactions, vendor contracts, client communications." She met Nathan's gaze steadily. "Richard has been undermining me since I became CEO. The leak was strategic, designed to create chaos and cast doubt on my judgment. I want to know why." By noon, Victoria had hired Detective Miles Brennan, ex-FBI specializing in corporate fraud with a reputation for thorough, airtight investigations. His fee was steep, but Victoria paid it from her personal account. This couldn't be an official company expense, not yet. Miles delivered his first report in mid-November. The findings were damning. Email correspondence between Richard Kendrick and Tech Brand Solutions, Ashford & Partners' primary competitor. Timestamp Tuesday, September 12th, 11:47 p.m. Subject line, mutual interests. The message was brief but explicit. Ashford will collapse within 6 months. New leadership is inevitable. Let's discuss terms. Fake invoices spanning 2 years totaling $2.3 million. Payments to shell companies, money transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The paper trail was sophisticated, but not perfect. Richard had gotten lazy comfortable in his assumption that no one was looking closely enough to notice the discrepancies. Miles dropped a second folder on Victoria's desk during their late November meeting. Security footage, enhanced and time-stamped. The video showed Richard Kendrick at the communal printer at 2:34 a.m. on October 19th. The office was empty, just him and the glow of his phone screen. He removed several pages from the output tray, examined them, then used his phone to photograph each page before carefully placing one back in the tray. The expense report. Marcus's name and Victoria's name side by side, hotel room details circled in yellow highlighter. Richard had prepared the document for maximum visibility, then left it where it would cause the most damage. He leaked it deliberately. Miles observed. Not opportunistic. Calculated. He wanted to distract from his embezzlement by creating a bigger scandal. Can we prove that the timing's suspicious? He starts setting up shell companies 18 months ago. Payments accelerate in June and July. Your Henderson trip happens in October. The leak occurs 3 days later. He's been bleeding the company dry, and when you promoted Donovan for Chicago, it threatened his position. Victoria studied the footage, watching Richard's face as he arranged the evidence of other people's destruction. So this wasn't about Marcus at all. Marcus was collateral damage. Miles closed the folder. Richard's target has always been you. The third folder arrived in late November. This one contained Marcus's new assignment. Western Division reporting to Margaret Hayes. The transfer had been processed through official channels, evaluated by independent supervisors designed to eliminate any appearance of conflict of interest. Victoria had stayed as far from the decision as company policy allowed. Margaret Hayes was notorious for her fairness and her exacting standards. If Marcus earned a promotion under her supervision, no one could question it. Victoria told herself this was the right move, the professional move, the move that protected Marcus from further scrutiny while allowing the investigation to proceed without interference. She did not tell herself that seeing his name in a different department, knowing she'd no longer encounter him in meetings or hallways, felt like losing something she'd never really had. Early December. Marcus was loading files into his car in the parking garage when Richard approached. The CFO moved with the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable, hands in his pockets, expression casual. "You're making a mistake." Marcus closed the trunk and faced him. "Am I? You think anyone will believe you? A black analyst versus a white CFO?" Richard's smile was cold. "I'll bury you, Donovan. I'll bury you so deep no one will remember your name." Marcus kept his voice steady, despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "I didn't start this war, but I won't let you destroy innocent people. We'll see about that." Richard walked away, and Marcus stood in the parking garage for several minutes, hands shaking, trying to process the naked threat in those words. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Victoria's private number, the one she'd given him during the Chicago trip for emergencies. "Richard knows about the investigation." The response came 30 seconds later. "I know. Stay safe." Mid-December arrived like a punch to the gut. Monday morning, 8:17 a.m., the company-wide email hit every inbox simultaneously. From Richard Kendrick, Chief Financial Officer. Subject: formal complaint. The body text was clinical, professional, devastating. "I am compelled to report inappropriate conduct that occurred during the Chicago business trip of October 12th. Marcus Donovan made repeated unwanted advances towards CEO Victoria Ashford. As a senior member of this organization, I cannot in good conscience remain silent about behavior that violates our harassment policies." Attached were photoshopped text messages showing explicit propositions Marcus had never sent. Fabricated witness statements from employees who'd allegedly seen improper interactions. A timeline constructed from half-truths and manufactured evidence that painted Marcus as a predator and Victoria as his target. Marcus's phone started ringing at 8:19. HR. He was placed on administrative leave, effective immediately, pending investigation. The words professional, transparent and fair appeared multiple times in Patricia Morgan's carefully scripted explanation. Marcus heard none of it. His world had narrowed to a single thought. This is how it ends. Not with justice or recognition, but with lies that people will believe because believing is easier than questioning. He drove home in a fog, pulled into his parking space, sat in the car for 20 minutes before he could force himself to move. Inside the apartment, everything was exactly as he'd left it that morning. Zara's backpack by the door, breakfast dishes in the sink, the photo of Sarah on the mantel, her smile frozen in time, forever young, forever happy. He'd promised her in those final moments before the machines were turned off that he'd give their daughter a good life, that he'd be strong enough for both of them. He wasn't strong enough for this. The dam broke. 4 years of grief, of loneliness, of carrying everything alone came pouring out in great racking sobs that shook his entire body. He collapsed onto the couch, face in his hands, and let himself fall apart. "Daddy." He looked up. Zara stood in the hallway, her eyes wide with concern. Sienna must have brought her home early from the afternoon playdate. His sister appeared behind Zara, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she saw Marcus's face. "Daddy, are you okay?" He couldn't answer. Couldn't find words that would make sense to a 6-year-old. Couldn't explain that the world was cruel in ways she shouldn't have to understand yet. Zara crossed the room and climbed onto the couch, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "They're lying, aren't they? You're a good man." The simple certainty in her voice nearly broke him all over again. "Sometimes being good isn't enough, baby." Sienna ushered Zara into her bedroom with promises of a movie and popcorn, then returned to sit beside Marcus. Her hand found his shoulder steady and warm. "Talk to me." He told her everything. Chicago, the hotel, the conversation, the leak, the rumors, the promotion he'd refused, and now this final accusation that could destroy him completely. Sienna listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." Marcus wiped his eyes, exhaustion settling into every muscle. "Lawyer up, I guess. Fight it. Hope someone believes me. Victoria believes you." "Does she?" The question came out bitter. "She hasn't said a word to me in 6 weeks. Maybe she's trying to protect you. Or maybe she's protecting herself." The HR investigation began in late December. 3 interviews in 4 days, each one more invasive than the last. Patricia Morgan conducted them with professional detachment, asking Marcus to recount every moment of the Chicago trip, every conversation, every interaction. The hotel room, the hours between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., what they'd discussed, where they'd slept, whether there had been any physical contact whatsoever. Nothing inappropriate occurred. Marcus had repeated this phrase so many times it had lost all meaning. We talked. 2 lonely people who needed to be heard. That's all. "Do you believe Miss Ashford acted improperly?" "No." He met Patricia's gaze directly. She acted human. "For the first time since I've known her, she let someone see past the title. That's not a crime." Patricia made notes, her pen scratching across the page. "And you're certain Mr. Kendrick's accusations are false? Completely certain? The text messages are fake?" "I never sent them. The witnesses are lying. Whatever agenda Richard has, it's not about protecting Victoria or the company. It's about protecting himself." "How do you know that?" "Because Victoria's been investigating him for weeks." Marcus hadn't meant to reveal this, but exhaustion had worn away his filters. "Ask her. Ask about the embezzlement, the offshore accounts, the emails to competitors. Richard's not filing a harassment claim because he's concerned about company ethics. He's trying to discredit the people who are about to expose him." Patricia's expression remained neutral, but her pen stopped moving. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan. We'll be in touch." Marcus left the conference room feeling hollowed out. He'd just bet everything on Victoria following through on Miles, finding enough evidence to prove Richard's corruption on justice actually existing in a world that had shown him precious little of it lately. Late December. Miles Brennan sat in a small cafe 3 blocks from Richard Kendrick's lawyer's office, wearing a baseball cap, an unremarkable jacket, holding a newspaper he wasn't reading. The recorder in his pocket captured everything. Richard had chosen poorly meeting his attorney in a semi-public space where conversations could be overheard if someone knew where to sit and what to listen for. "I fabricated the harassment claim to cover the embezzlement." Richard's voice was low but clear. "Donovan and Ashford." Nothing happened in that hotel room, but a black man accused of harassing a white woman. Case closed. No one asks questions. Meanwhile, I finish moving the money. Resign, quietly disappear, before anyone connects the dots. The lawyer's response was muffled, cautious. "Don't worry about evidence. I've been building this case for weeks. By the time HR finishes their investigation, Donovan will be radioactive. Victoria will be too busy managing the fallout to notice the final transfers. It's perfect." Miles adjusted his position slightly, making sure the recorder caught every word. The conversation continued for another 12 minutes. Richard, laying out his strategy in precise detail, confident in his invincibility, oblivious to the man 3 tables away, documenting his confession. Late December, Miles delivered the recording to Victoria's office, along with a legal analysis from 3 separate attorneys, confirming its admissibility. Richard had been discussing his crimes in a public cafe. No reasonable expectation of privacy. The recording could be used in both criminal proceedings and the company's internal investigation. Victoria listened to it twice, her expression carved from stone. When it finished, she looked at Miles. "How fast can we move?" "Board meeting can be called for early January. 48 hours notice required. We present everything at once." The The evidence tampering the false accusations. Richard won't see it coming until he's already buried. And Marcus, he'll be exonerated completely. Miles closed his laptop. But Victoria, you need to understand, when this goes public there will be questions. About your judgment, your handling of the Chicago trip, why you didn't prevent the scandal. The board might... I don't care what the board thinks. Her voice was steel. Marcus Donovan has spent 2 months being destroyed by lies because I chose him for a business trip. Richard Kendrick stole $2.3 million and tried to frame an innocent man to cover his tracks. If the board wants my resignation after I fix this, they can have it. But I'm not letting Richard win. Miles nodded slowly. Then we move in January. Victoria spent the next week preparing, building the case, organizing evidence, rehearsing her presentation, consulting with attorneys and board members she trusted.
Nathan Pierce helped her navigate the political landscape, identifying allies and obstacles. Margaret Hayes provided character testimony for Marcus, documenting his exemplary performance in the Western Division during his weeks under her supervision. On the night before the board meeting, Victoria sat alone in her penthouse, surrounded by file folders and legal briefs, and let herself feel the weight of what she was about to do. Exposing Richard would vindicate Marcus, but it wouldn't undo the damage. It wouldn't erase the rumors or restore his unblemished reputation or give him back the peace he'd lost that night in Chicago. Some things once broken stayed broken, no matter how carefully you tried to put the pieces back together. But she could give him justice. She could make sure the truth mattered more than gossip. She could ensure that when Zara grew up and heard stories about her father, those stories would be about his integrity, his courage, his refusal to compromise his principles, even when it cost him everything. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was all Victoria had to offer, and she'd be damned if she didn't offer it with everything she had. Tuesday, early January 9:03 a.m. The boardroom on Ashford and Partners' 14th floor held 7 people and enough tension to shatter glass. Victoria stood at the head of the conference table, her laptop connected to the wall-mounted screen, 47 slides queued and ready. She'd rehearsed this presentation 6 times in the past 24 hours. Her hands were steady. Richard Kendrick sat 3 chairs down, his posture relaxed, confident. He didn't know yet. None of them did, except Nathan Pierce, who'd helped Victoria coordinate the timing, and Margaret Hayes, who'd flown in from the Western Division specifically for this meeting. Gerald Hutchins, the oldest board member and Richard's most reliable ally, checked his watch with obvious irritation. This better be important, Victoria. Some of us had to reschedule significant commitments. It is. Victoria clicked to the first slide. 2 months ago, our company was targeted by a coordinated attack designed to destabilize leadership, destroy employee reputations, and cover up systematic theft. Today, I'm presenting evidence of that attack and recommending immediate action. Richard's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Calculation. The next 20 minutes were methodical. Victoria walked through the email correspondence with Tech Brand Solutions timestamp visible on every message. September 12th, 11:47 p.m. Ashford will collapse within 6 months. She displayed the fake invoices, the shell company transactions, the offshore account transfers totaling $2.3 million over 18 months. Each slide built on the previous one, creating a narrative so airtight that even Gerald couldn't find gaps to exploit. These are serious accusations. Richard's voice remained calm. I assume you have actual proof beyond circumstantial evidence? Victoria clicked to the security footage. The timestamp read 2:34 a.m. October 19th. Richard stood at the printer, illuminated by his phone screen, arranging papers with deliberate care. The video quality was crystal clear, enhanced by professional forensic analysis. His face was unmistakable. This is you, Mr. Kendrick, preparing to leak confidential employee information. The expense report showing my Chicago trip with Marcus Donovan. You highlighted specific details, photographed the pages, then left one copy where it would cause maximum damage. The leak wasn't opportunistic. It was strategic. That proves nothing. Richard leaned back in his chair. I was working late. I may have glanced at a document left on the printer. The forensic analysis shows you accessed the financial database at 2:27 a.m. using your credentials. You printed the expense report, modified it to emphasize certain details, then deliberately placed it for discovery. Victoria advanced the slides. But that's just the beginning. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. Victoria, where are you going with this? In mid-December, Mr. Kendrick filed a formal harassment complaint against Marcus Donovan. The accusations were detailed, specific, supported by text messages and witness statements. She paused. Every single piece of evidence was fabricated. That's a lie. Richard's composure cracked slightly. I have witnesses who, your witnesses recanted when interviewed by HR. They admitted you coached them on what to say. Victoria pulled up the sworn statements. The text messages were analysed by 3 independent forensic experts. All 3 confirmed they were created using commercially available spoofing software. The metadata doesn't match Marcus Donovan's phone. It matches yours. This is a witch hunt. Richard stood abruptly. You're manufacturing evidence to protect your relationship with Sit Down, Mr. Kendrick. Margaret Hayes' voice cut through the room like a blade. I've worked with Marcus Donovan for the past 6 weeks. His performance has been exemplary. His character is beyond reproach. And I've seen enough fabricated evidence in my 23 years here to recognize it when I see it. Richard remained standing, his face flushed. The board won't accept this. You're targeting me because I questioned your judgment. Victoria plugged a small speaker into her laptop. Actually, Mr. Kendrick, you're being targeted because you confessed. The recording played. Richard's voice filled the room clear and damning. I fabricated the harassment claim to cover the embezzlement. Donovan and Ashford. Nothing happened in that hotel room, but a black man accused of harassing a white woman. Case closed. No one asks questions. The boardroom went silent. 7 people frozen as Richard's recorded confession continued for 93 seconds. When it ended, the only sound was Gerald Hutchins's ragged breathing. Richard's face had gone from red to pale. That recording is inadmissible. It was obtained illegally. You were in a public cafe discussing crimes with your attorney. Victoria closed her laptop. 3 separate legal teams confirmed the recording is admissible in both criminal and civil proceedings. You had no reasonable expectation of privacy. Gerald found his voice first. When was this recorded? Late December. Victoria looked directly at Richard.
You've been under investigation since early November. Every transaction, every communication, every attempt to obstruct justice has been documented. The vote took 11 minutes. Richard Kendrick was terminated, immediately escorted from the building by security, his office sealed pending criminal investigation. The vote was 6-1. Only Gerald Hutchins abstained, unable to defend Richard, but unwilling to admit he'd been wrong. Victoria stood at the window after the board members filed out, watching the city below, feeling nothing. Victory was supposed to feel different than this. Cleaner, less hollow. You did the right thing. Nathan appeared beside her, his reflection visible in the glass. Marcus will be cleared. Richard will face consequences. The company is protected. I destroyed a man's life because I chose him for a business trip. You didn't destroy anything. Richard did. Nathan turned to face her directly. You're just the one who exposed it.
That doesn't make Marcus whole again. No, but it makes him free. Mid-January, 10:42 a.m. Marcus was loading breakfast dishes into the dishwasher when his phone rang. Patricia Morgan from HR. His hands shook as he answered. Mr. Donovan, the investigation has concluded. All allegations against you have been dismissed. You're cleared of any wrongdoing. He gripped the counter edge, suddenly dizzy. The accusations, false, fabricated. Richard Kendrick has been terminated. We'll be issuing a formal company-wide statement this afternoon. She paused. I'm sorry, Marcus. This should never have happened to you. After the call ended, Marcus sat at the kitchen table for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. Vindication felt strange. Distant, like something happening to someone else. 6 weeks of rumors, of whispered conversations and sideways glances of his daughter, asking why people said mean things about Daddy. None of that could be erased by a phone call and a company statement.
The official email arrived early afternoon. Marcus Donovan is fully exonerated of all allegations. Mr. Donovan has been promoted to Senior Marketing Analyst Western Division, effective immediately. Salary $102,000 annually. He read it 3 times before the words started to make sense. Zara found him on the couch that evening, staring at his phone. Daddy, you look different. Different how, baby? Not sad anymore, just tired. She climbed into his lap and he held her, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. Yeah, he whispered, I am tired. But the bad stuff is over now, right? People will stop saying mean things. Marcus wanted to promise her that. Wanted to tell her the world was fair and justice always prevailed and everything would be fine now. Instead, he said, I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. The next 4 weeks blurred together. Marcus threw himself into work with Margaret Hayes, rebuilding his reputation. One analysis at a time, one successful campaign, one client presentation. His colleagues were cautiously friendly, some apologetic, others simply pretending the past 2 months had never happened. He accepted their olive branches with professional courtesy and kept his distance. At night, he lay awake thinking about Victoria, about the conversation in the hotel room, the way she'd looked at him when he'd refused the promotion, the weight of everything they'd never said to each other. She'd saved his career, exposed Richard, given him justice. But she'd also stayed completely silent. No call, no text, no acknowledgement beyond the official company channels. Maybe that was better, cleaner, safer for both of them. Early February, 9:53 a.m. The knock on Marcus's apartment door startled him mid-coffee. He wasn't expecting anyone.
Sienna had taken Zara to the Science Museum, promising to return by lunch. He opened the door and found Victoria standing in his hallway wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking nothing like the CEO who'd dismantled Richard Kendrick in front of the board. "You're the pretty lady from Daddy's picture." Marcus turned. Zara stood behind him, eyes wide, having apparently escaped from Sienna's car to run back inside for a forgotten jacket. She pushed past Marcus and beamed up at Victoria. "You're Miss Victoria. Daddy talks about you when he sleeps." Marcus's face went hot. "Zara, that's not. Do you talk about me too?" Zara's expression was pure innocence. Victoria knelt down, meeting Zara at eye level. "Sometimes. Is that okay?" "Yes, because Daddy needs friends." She grabbed Victoria's hand. "Do you want to come inside? We have cookies." "Well, we had cookies. Daddy ate most of them because he was sad, but we can make more." Sienna appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "I am so sorry. She got away from me." She looked between Marcus and Victoria, understanding dawning. "Oh, should I stay?" Marcus found his voice. "Please." He looked at Victoria. "Would you like to come in?" Victoria's composure wavered. "I don't want to intrude. I just came to apologize. For everything." Zara tugged her hand. "You can apologize inside, while we make cookies." 3 hours later, the kitchen smelled like vanilla and burnt edges. Zara had appointed herself head chef, directing Victoria through the cookie-making process with the absolute authority of a 6-year-old who'd watched the Food Network. Flour dusted Victoria's sweater. Chocolate chips dotted the counter. The first batch had come out slightly charred, but Zara declared them perfect anyway. Marcus watched from the doorway, something tight in his chest loosening gradually. Victoria was awkward with the mixer, uncertain about measurements, clearly out of her element in a domestic kitchen. But she listened to Zara's instructions with complete seriousness, asked questions like Zara was a genuine expert, laughed when the batter splattered on her jeans. After the cookies cooled and Zara had sampled 3, declaring them the best cookies ever created in human history, Sienna announced she was taking Zara to the park. The suggestion was subtle, but pointed, giving Marcus and Victoria space to talk. The apartment felt too quiet after they left. Victoria sat on the couch, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, looking anywhere but at Marcus. "I came to apologize." Her voice was soft. "I destroyed your life by choosing you for Chicago. I should have anticipated the fallout, should have protected you better, You couldn't have known." Marcus sat in the armchair across from her. "Neither of us could have predicted Richard would weaponize a business trip." "That doesn't make it okay. I'm your CEO. It was my responsibility to protect you from exactly this kind of targeting. You saved my career, exposed a criminal, made sure the truth mattered more than gossip." Marcus leaned forward. "You could have stayed silent. Let me take the hit. Moved on. You didn't. Because staying silent would have been easier." Victoria met his eyes finally. "I spent 6 weeks watching you suffer for a crime you didn't commit. Watching rumors destroy your reputation while I investigated Richard in secret. You thought I'd abandoned you. I did. I know. And I'm sorry. But if I'd reached out, if I'd shown any personal interest while you were under investigation, it would have confirmed every suspicion, made everything worse. You were protecting me. I was protecting us both." Victoria set down her mug. "I don't know how to do this, Marcus. Be a person instead of a title. Let people in. Risk caring about someone who might—" She trailed off. "Leave Marcus finished." "I disappoint you, yes." The honesty in that single word cut through all the careful distance Marcus had been maintaining. He thought about the hotel room, about Victoria's confession, that she'd spent 28 years learning to need no one, about the way her voice had cracked when she'd talked about her parents choosing their new families over her. "I lost my wife 4 years ago." His throat felt tight. Car accident on I-580, instant no warning. 1 minute she was dropping Zara at daycare. The next minute state troopers were at my door. For 4 years I told myself that caring about someone again meant risking that same loss, that it was safer to just get through each day. Take care of Zara, do my job, not let anyone close enough to hurt me. And now
Now I have a 6-year-old who asks why I never smile like I used to, who notices when I'm faking happiness, who told me nights shouldn't be lonely. Marcus managed a weak laugh. She's wiser than both of us combined.
She invited me to her school play.
Victoria's expression softened. A few weeks ago. Left a note in my assistant's inbox with careful crayon letters. I didn't tell you I was coming because I wasn't sure if you'd want me there. I saw you in the audience. Marcus remembered that moment, the way his heart had stuttered hope and fear tangled together. Zara was so happy you came. Were you? The question hung between them, loaded with everything they hadn't said in 3 months. Marcus thought about all the reasons he should say no. Professional boundaries, reputation, concerns, the very real possibility that caring about Victoria meant risking more pain. Then he thought about Zara's words. Try harder. Or find someone to help you. Yes. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. I was happy you were there. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know how to do this, she repeated, but I want to learn. If you'll let me. 1 step at a time. 1 step at a time.
The coffee dates started the following Saturday, 10 a.m. at a different cafe each week. Conversations that ranged from work to Zara to the small details of daily life. Marcus learned that Victoria hated mornings but loved thunderstorms, that she'd taught herself to cook from YouTube videos but could never get pasta to turn out right, that she read mystery novels before bed and sometimes cried at commercials. Victoria learned that Marcus had wanted to be an architect before life redirected him toward marketing, that he still sketched building designs in his spare time, detailed pencil drawings he never showed anyone, that he made up elaborate bedtime stories for Zara, featuring knights and dragons and quests that always ended with the hero learning it was okay to ask for help. By March, the Saturday routine had expanded. Coffee, then lunch, then sometimes a walk through Golden Gate Park or along the Embarcadero. They kept things public visible, letting people see them together as friends first, building a foundation that could withstand scrutiny. Mid-April brought Zara's school play. Marcus had assumed Victoria wouldn't come this time, given their increasingly obvious connection, but she appeared in the auditorium, took the empty seat beside him without asking permission, and whispered, "She invited me again." I couldn't say no. The play was a children's adaptation of a fairy tale, something about a lonely knight and a queen who'd forgotten how to smile. Zara played a princess who taught them both that friendship was braver than fighting dragons. The parallels were so obvious that Marcus felt his face heat. When it ended, Zara ran straight to both of them, grabbing their hands, demanding to know if they'd seen her remember all her lines. "You were perfect, sweetheart." Marcus hugged her. "The best princess I've ever seen." Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. "Can Miss Victoria come to dinner?" Zara looked between them hopefully. "Aunt Sienna is making her special lasagna, if it's okay with your dad." Marcus glanced at Victoria, at the vulnerability in her expression, at his daughter's hopeful face. "It's more than okay." Sienna's apartment was chaos and warmth. 10 people crowded around a too-small dining table, conversations, overlapping laughter filling the spaces. Marcus's extended family had gathered for Zara's play, and they absorbed Victoria into the fold with easy grace. Uncle James, 68 and opinionated, interrogated her about her intentions toward his nephew with the bluntness of someone who'd earned the right. Aunt Teresa asked about her family, then hugged her tightly when Victoria admitted she didn't have one. "You do now, honey." Teresa patted her cheek, "whether you like it or not." After dinner, after Zara fell asleep on the couch surrounded by cousins, Marcus and Victoria stood on Sienna's front porch. The April evening was cool, the city lights spreading below them in a carpet of gold and white. "Your family is wonderful. They adopted you in under 3 hours." Marcus smiled. "That's a record, actually. I've never had that." Victoria's voice was quiet. "People who just accept you. No conditions, no expectations. Just warmth. They see what I see. And what's that? Someone worth keeping." Victoria turned to face him, and Marcus could see her fighting tears. "I need to tell you something. I'm falling in love with you." His heart stopped, started again harder. "No. I've already fallen. I fought it for months because loving you meant risking everything I'd built. My career, my reputation, my carefully constructed walls. But you and Zara, you broke through all of it. And I don't know how to go back to being alone." The words Marcus had been holding back for weeks finally found their voice. "I love you too. You do. I didn't want to. I was terrified of losing someone again. But I'm more terrified of losing this whatever we have because I'm too scared to name it." Victoria closed the distance between them, her hand finding his. What do we do now? Now. Marcus pulled her closer. Now we stop being scared together. The kiss was gentle, tentative, weighted with 3 months of longing and fear and hope, tangled into something new. When they pulled apart, Victoria was crying softly, and Marcus realized his own eyes were wet. Sarah would have liked you, he whispered. She always said I needed someone stubborn enough to push me past my comfort zone. Am I stubborn relentlessly? Good. Victoria leaned her forehead against his. Because you're not getting rid of me now. The next 8 weeks were a careful dance of integration. Victoria stayed over 3 nights a week, gradually becoming part of the household rhythm. She learned Zara's bedtime routine, mastered the art of reading stories with proper dramatic flair, figured out which breakfast combinations Zara would actually eat. Marcus learned to share the space he'd guarded for 4 years, to let someone else make coffee in his kitchen, to accept help without feeling like he was failing. They fought occasionally. About small things, mostly. Victoria's tendency to work until midnight. Marcus's habit of deflecting serious conversations with humour. The unspoken question of what happened next, whether this was sustainable or temporary, or something neither of them dared name yet. But they worked through it, with honesty and patience, and the growing certainty that what they were building mattered more than the fear of losing it. Late spring brought a family barbecue at Sienna's house. The backyard was full of relatives, neighbours, friends from Zara's school. Victoria arrived with homemade potato salad that she'd practiced making 4 times to get right. Zara greeted her with a running hug, chattering about the butterfly garden they'd started in the apartment courtyard. Marcus watched them together. Victoria crouched down, listening to Zara's excited explanation of caterpillar metamorphosis, and felt something settle in his chest. This was what Sarah had wanted for him, not to replace her because that wasn't possible, but to find happiness again, to give Zara a full life with people who loved her. Sienna appeared beside him with 2 beers. You going to marry her? The question should have startled him. Instead, it felt inevitable. Eventually. If she'll have me. She will. Sienna clinked her bottle against his. She looks at you the way you used to look at Sarah, like you're her favourite person in the whole world. That night, lying in bed with Victoria asleep beside him, Marcus thought about the hotel room where this had all started. The rain pounding against the windows, the cramped space, the hours of conversation that had cracked both of them open. They'd been so careful then, so afraid of what connection might cost. Now Victoria's hand rested on his chest, her breathing steady and deep, and Marcus realized something fundamental had shifted. The fear wasn't gone. It probably never would be. But it was smaller than the love growing around it, quieter than Zara's laughter when Victoria helped her build elaborate pillow forts, weaker than the certainty that some risks were worth taking. He pulled Victoria closer, felt her stir and settle against him, and let himself believe in the possibility of second chances. Early summer brought small milestones. Victoria's toothbrush appeared in Marcus's bathroom. Her clothes migrated into his closet. Zara started calling her Miss Victoria Mom as a compromise until they figured out what came next. The apartment that had felt hollow for 4 years began to feel like a home again. One Saturday morning, Zara asked the question that had been building for weeks. Is Miss Victoria going to live with us forever? Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances. They'd talked about this in the abstract, but hearing it from Zara made it concrete, real, a decision that needed answering. Would you like that? Victoria asked carefully. Yes. Zara bounced on the couch. Then we'd be a real family, like Emma's family, but better because you make really good pancakes. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Victoria reached for his hand, squeezed gently. We're already a family baby. Marcus managed to keep his voice steady. Miss Victoria living here would just make it official. So she's staying. Zara's eyes were bright with hope. If she wants to. Victoria looked at Zara, then at Marcus, then back at Zara. I want to. Very much. If you're both sure. We're sure. Marcus said it for both of them and felt the truth of it settle into his bones. 2 years later, April brought sunshine and the familiar sound of Zara's laughter echoing through their new house in Piedmont. Marcus woke to find Victoria already up nursing 4-month-old Emma in the rocking chair by the window. The baby's tiny hand gripped her mother's finger, her eyes half closed in contentment. Marcus watched them for a moment, this second chance he'd been terrified to hope for. Victoria had walked into his life through a hotel room door during a storm, and somehow they'd both found their way home.
Daddy Zara burst through the bedroom door, 8 years old now, and full of unstoppable energy. "Can we go to the park today? Please. You promised we'd practice my skateboarding." "After breakfast, sweetheart." Zara spotted Victoria and Emma. "Oh, can Miss Victoria Mum come too?" "And Emma." Victoria smiled. "We'll all go. Family outing." The park was crowded with Saturday families. Marcus pushed Zara on the swings while Victoria sat on a nearby bench with Emma in a carrier. The baby cooed softly, her eyes tracking the movement of leaves overhead. Zara pumped her legs, demanding higher, higher, laughing with pure joy. When the swing slowed, Zara jumped off and ran to Victoria. "Can I hold Emma?" "Carefully." Victoria transferred the baby to Zara's waiting arms, supervising closely as Zara settled on the bench. Marcus joined them, his heart suddenly too full for his chest. Sarah's photo was still on their mantel at home, her memory woven into the fabric of their lives. Zara knew her mother through stories and pictures and the certainty that she'd been loved before she could remember. Emma would grow up knowing she had a sister who'd come before her, a legacy of love that predated her existence. "Daddy, you're doing it again." Zara looked up at him. Emma cradled carefully in her arms, doing what baby smiling the real smile.
"The one from the pictures with Mommy Sarah." She grinned. "I like that smile. It means you're happy for real, not just pretending." Marcus crouched down beside his daughters, meeting Zara's eyes. "You know what, sweetie, I think Mommy Sarah would be happy about all this, about our family. I know she is." Zara's certainty was absolute. "I can feel it." She looked at Emma. "We're lucky, right? Some people only get one family. We got two." Victoria's hand found Marcus's shoulder, steady and warm. He looked up at her, at this woman who'd been brave enough to tear down her own walls, who'd fought for him when it cost her everything, who'd learned to build a home out of love and pancakes and bedtime stories. "Yeah, baby." Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. "We're really lucky." The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting patterns of light and shadow across the grass. Around them, the park hummed with life. Children playing, dogs barking, couples walking hand in hand.
Just another Saturday in a long string of ordinary days. But Marcus had learned something essential. Ordinary days were the real miracle. Not the dramatic rescues or the courtroom victories or the moments that changed everything. Just these quiet mornings with his family safe and together, building a life from the wreckage of loss and the courage to try again. The door he'd been afraid to open, the room he'd thought would destroy him. It had saved him instead, not because of the space itself, but because of who'd been there with him when everything else fell away, and because a 6-year-old girl had refused to let her father stay lonely, had seen past his careful masks to the truth underneath. Emma gurgled softly in Zara's arms. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Marcus reached for his phone to capture the moment, then stopped. Some things didn't need preserving. They just needed living. He sat beside his family on that park bench, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face, letting himself be happy. Not in spite of the past, but because of it. Because grief and joy weren't opposites, but partners in the long work of being human. Because second chances came to those brave enough to believe in them. The fear would always be there, lurking in quiet moments, whispering about all the ways this could fall apart. But it was background noise now, drowned out by Zara's laughter, by Emma's contented sounds, by Victoria's hand in his steady and sure. Some doors open to rooms we never expected. Some storms strand us in places that become home. Some nights of conversation in cramped hotels become the foundation for everything that matters. Marcus had spent 4 years learning to survive. It took one storm, one hotel room, one impossible connection to remember how to live. And living, he'd discovered, was worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty along the way.